And I think if people really realize this, then they would know how important one vote is. And they would never say again, my one vote won't count. Because the three most consequential things that happened to Black people in this country were each decided by a single vote.
What if I told you that Reconstruction didn't fall apart because the country agreed? It collapsed because of one vote. Today, Congressman Jim Clyburn explains how 3 single votes reshaped American history and why he believes it could happen again. We talk about the impeachment of Andrew Johnson, the 1876 election, the end of Reconstruction, and the 95-year gap before another Black lawmaker from South Carolina returned to Congress. I'm Esther Dillard, and this is The Color Between the Lines. Let's listen in to the conversation. I have to move to Reconstruction because it's really so pivotal to the book and how little Americans really know about Reconstruction. Do you think that that lack of understanding really makes it harder for people today to connect the dots between what happened in the past and what we're seeing now in politics and public policy?
Absolutely. I think that if people really knew the story of Reconstruction, how it came about, and most importantly, how it came to an end. The 3 most consequential things that happened after the Civil War were each decided by a single vote. The first one happened to be the impeachment of Andrew Johnson. And when Abraham Lincoln was murdered, Andrew Johnson became president of the United States. And Andrew Johnson set out to undo everything Lincoln had done. And in doing so, he even ignored all of the laws passed by Congress. And the House of Representatives got so upset with him, they impeached him. And when they did and sent the impeachment to the Senate failed to convict him by a single vote. One vote. They failed to impeach him. Now, that allowed this dismantling of Lincoln's legacy to continue. And it culminated in 1876 when we had a presidential election. In that presidential election, as you know, you don't get elected really by the popular vote. You get elected by the Electoral College. And at the time of the 1876 election, you needed 185 electoral votes in order to get elected president. Samuel Tilden had 184. And Brother B. Hayes, his opponent, a Republican, had 165. Tilden was 1 vote short. Brother B. Hayes was 20 votes short. Now, as the Constitution requires, if nobody gets a majority electoral college vote, the election gets thrown into the House of Representatives and the House will make the decision. So the House of Representatives, not knowing what to do, appointed a 15-person commission to go out and study this issue, meet with the candidates, and make a recommendation to the House as to what to do. That committee met, and it, by a vote of 8-7, gave the disputed votes, which were 20, coming from 3 states, Florida, South Carolina, and Louisiana. They gave those 20 votes to Hayes because Hayes promised them, you give me these 20 votes, I will get to the magic number of 185, I'll bring an end to Reconstruction. So by a vote of 8-7, Reconstruction came to an end. By a vote of 185 to 184, Jim Crow became the law of the land. And I think it's important for people to realize, a lot of people seem to feel that all of this happened by some big wave coming over the country. No, the country was as closely divided then as it is now, maybe even closer then. because these three events were each decided by a single vote. And I think if people really realize this, then they would know how important one vote is. And they would never say again, my one vote won't count.
That wasn't a landslide. It was a razor-thin decision. One vote allowed Reconstruction to collapse and ushered in nearly 100 years of Jim Crow. And Congressman Jim Clyburn made it clear, if we misunderstand that history, we misunderstand the present.
But in the middle of writing this book, the 2020 election came about. And I'm sitting there watching television and the results coming in and the reaction to it. And I remember that night, people banging on those windows and doors up in Detroit, trying to break into the where they were counting the votes, trying to set up a second set of electors. I was sitting on the floor on January 6, 2021, when they tried to stop the electoral vote count so that they could get some alternative electors. I, like so many other people, heard the President of the United States on the phone talking to the Secretary of State down in Georgia, find me 11,780 votes so I can get those electoral votes coming out of Georgia. And that's when I got in touch with my publisher and I says, we got to change the direction of this book. This book can't just be about these 8 people. It's got to be about the events that brought these 8 people's careers to an end. It's got to be about why there is 95 years between number 8 on this list and yours truly, number 9. 95 years between George Washington Murray and Jim Clyburn. And that's why we changed the book so that people can see the parallels between what's going on right now and what happened then. And I say in this book, in the epilogue I wrote, the book became a cautionary tale to say to people, like I used to say to those students I used to teach, anything that's happened before can happen again. And we've all heard about the 1960s ushering in the second Reconstruction. Well, the reason you got a second Reconstruction is the first one came to an end. And if the first Reconstruction can come to an end, then the second Reconstruction can come to an end. And I think that that's what we see now. If the 1960s, with the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, the Fair Housing Law of 1968, and all of these things ushering in a new Reconstruction, we see a Supreme Court now reinterpreting what the 65 Voting Rights Act really means. We are now waiting on the Supreme Court to make a decision on the last little segment of that law. So I'm saying that what's going on today is an attempt by the powers that be to bring the quote unquote second Reconstruction to an end and turn the clock back.
But this story isn't just about collapse, it's also about leadership. Clyburn shared a story about one of the most overlooked figures in American history.
Nobody in the history of South Carolina is more consequential to the general order than Robert Smalls. Smalls got his freedom from his own ingenuity. He pulled off what I call the great escape in the book. He escaped from slavery, brought his family along and his friends, stole the prize ship of the Confederate Navy, delivered it to the Union forces. And for that, he got his freedom and a big cash reward. I call Smalls the most consequential South Carolinian who ever lived. I believe that. Not John C. Calhoun, not Strom Thurmond, Robert Smalls, born enslaved, escaped from slavery, became a 10-year member of the South Carolina legislature and then a 10-year member of the United States Congress. He was the one that wrote the resolution that provided free public education for all. The first one to do so in the whole country was done by him in South Carolina. All of us, without ever having any formal education at all. Nobody in the history of South Carolina is more consequential to the general order than Robert Smalls was. So this guy was just incredible. Now, there was also a very human side to him. When Smalls gained all of this wealth, he went back to Beaufort, where he was enslaved. He bought the house that he was a slave in, as well as the house next door. And when his former master, John McKee, died, left his widow penniless, Smalls brought her back into that house and kept her, really nursed her until she died in 1904. So about 15 or 16 years, he kept the woman who had been his enslaver.
I love the moment in the book where you brought out that Smalls, even after escaping slavery, he nearly finds himself captured again and then the
Yes.
co-captain of the ship. Can you talk a little bit about that moment and what that revealed
Well,
to you?
I also said that Robert Smalls was the only genuine hero of the Civil War. If you look at all the people that fought in the Civil War, most we've heard about Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee, it's kind of interesting, but when Robert Smalls stole that platter, according to the research I've done, Robert E. Lee was in Charleston around the same time that he stole that ship. He was down there operating between Savannah and Charleston, trying to win the Civil War for the Southerners. And so Robert Smalls outmaneuvered everybody, including Lee. But I think that if you look at the war, when Robert Smalls stole that ship, a bounty was put on his head. I think I read somewhere there was $6,000 for anybody who could deliver him.
That's a lot back
And
then.
of course, they wanted the ship back as well. Well, Smalls had been put in charge of that ship. He's all like the navigator. And so while he was navigating that ship one day, the Confederate forces saw that ship and they attempted to recover that ship and capture Smalls. And the battle got so fierce until the ship's captain ordered Smalls to beach the ship and to give up. Smalls refused to do so. And he locked the captain up into the coal bin and he took over the ship, won the battle, and delivered that ship safely back to the Union forces. And when they found out what happened, they fired the ship's captain and hired Smalls and made him captain of the ship.
Many don't know this, but Congressman Clyburn began his career as a high school history teacher. And he says one of the biggest mistakes educators make is teaching dates instead of events. If students only memorize years but don't understand decisions, they miss the real lesson. And the lesson here is really simple. Democracy can shift on one single vote.
I had a history teacher who I did not think taught history as it should be taught. Because I had grown up in a household where my dad required that every night before retiring to bed, we had to share with him a current event. And it meant that we had to read the newspapers, and after we did homework, then we had to sit down with him and share some current event. And that meant so much to me. And here I am sitting in a history class in high school, and the teacher would be talking about dates rather than events. And that didn't strike me as the way we ought to be learning stuff, because so much of it just wasn't true. I mean, Columbus didn't discover America in 1492. America was here before he ever got here. He was lost. He just didn't know where he was. And that's the kind of thing that started me to thinking. And so when I became a teacher myself, I decided that I was going to be teaching in dates. In fact, I would open my class every year telling the students, I'm going to give you 2 dates right now. They're the only 2 dates that I want you all to even think about remembering. And between all of that, we would talk about events. And so that's just the way I taught history. In fact, I didn't use the textbooks they gave me. The textbooks were reference books. I used the newspapers, the morning news, and that's the way I taught. I want the students to be able to relate to what they were being taught in the classroom.
Congressman Clyburn says history is not just about what happened. It's about what we choose to protect. His book is called First 8, The Black Congressmen Who Built Reconstruction and Reshaped America. A powerful examination of the first 8 Black lawmakers during Reconstruction and what their rise and the end of their era teaches us about today. If you're an educator, a student of history, or someone just trying to understand how fragile democracy systems can be, this conversation is essential. You can find the book wherever books are sold. I'm Esther Dillard, and this has been The Color Between the Lines. Remember, your story matters. Let's use it to move the world.